Okay, today we're going to be talking about how to clip objects in your dojo. If you have not already watched my basics video, please do, even if you think you know what you're doing, because odds are you've probably missed something and I would like to make sure we are all on the same level before proceeding. Some of you might be watching just so you can comment and say, Vash, I don't need to be able to clip to be a good decorator. And you know what? That could possibly be true. You might be able to make something that's half decent looking, but then congratulations, you've made the square peg fit the round hole. And the only person laughing then sure as hell isn't you. If you plan to do any sculpting of any kind in the dojo, this is something you absolutely must know. And if you plan to make any grand architectural works, this is something that's going to make your life a lot easier, and I will show later that this is necessary to pull off some interesting things. To start, we are going to talk about anchor points. The anchor point is often in the center of an object, as indicated by the axes for constrained movement once you enter the mode to sea. It is, for the most part, true, not always though. If we take a look at this asteroid rock or look at the larger asteroid rock pillar, that is the case. However, if we go and look at, say, the Entrati buttress, then you will see that this is probably the most janky anchor point you will ever see. It is not aligned with the bottom, nor is it aligned with the back. It is only aligned with this single side here. It makes no sense, but it is what it is. And then also on curved items, like say this curve trim, you will see that it is on the inside corner, out away from the object itself. This is kind of cursed, but also useful in its own ways. And then if we go and look at the Grenier statue here, you will see that it is on the bottom. The anchor point is not the anchor point because it weighs anything down, but rather because it is the point by which the object is rotated and moved upon. There are two types of clipping, parallel and angular. We're going to talk about parallel first, but I want to talk a little bit about how an anchor point functions. For the purposes of this tutorial, I want you to picture the anchor point as a cube with collision detectors on each surface. However, only one collision detector can be active at any given time. We'll get into that later though. Now that I've explained the anchor point, I'm going to get into the first type of clipping, and that is called parallel clipping. When you go to bring an object through a surface using constrained movement, the bottom collision detector will trigger and the surface will simply say no. And if you go and look here, you'll see that it's actually not even touching. The distance here is quite small. However, when you go to place an object, the collision is handled a little bit differently. The cube for constrained movement collision detection is a little bit larger, and then the placement collision detection is fixed on a single point at the center of the cube. So when you go to place something, you're able to place it against a surface instead of near it. Because of how this works, when you place an object against a surface, half of the cube is already through, and so the bottom collision detector can't trigger anything. So when you switch into local constrained movement and try to move down, it's not going to find anything to stop you, and then you can sink it through the floor. Keep in mind though that just because I have called it parallel clipping does not mean the object has to be parallel to the surface. It can be angled and it keeps the same exact concepts, and I'll kind of show that here. As long as you have pressed it into the floor, you will have at least one surface at all times that has a bypassed detector. The next type of clipping we will talk about is called angular clipping. This can be used in the same way that parallel clipping is used. However, it is mainly meant for when you are trying to clip through one or more surfaces. Obviously, parallel clipping won't work when you have multiple surfaces to clip through, because you can only press the object against one surface, and any surface beyond that you can't reach, you can't bypass. Angular clipping comes in here, and the way this one works is, given its namesake, it has to be at an angle. So as the example here, I have set this to 15 degrees. You do not have to do 15 degrees, and I'll show that later, but with this, when you go to pull it down at the angle, you will still encounter the regular collision. However, because it is at a slight angle, so long as the angle is not too extreme, you are able to go the other direction and slide it. And because, as I was telling you before, only one collision detector can be active at a time, you can slide until the side detector gets a hit and stops you. However, by the time you have reached the spot that the side detector will trigger, the bottom is in a position now where it can slide through. This is incredibly convenient, and also you can go the reverse way as well, because when you try to move it back up, you will still get that upward collision, but you can slide it the other direction now. The top is bypassed, and now you can slide it up again. To go with what I was saying earlier, it does not have to be 15 degrees. Rotation snap is just convenient, so you can switch the object back to the rotation it was at before you started moving it around. In this case, I'm going to change this object very ever so slightly, and then you can see that I just have to move it over farther. Obviously, the smaller the angle, the farther you have to move it over before the bottom is bypassed, and then you can slide it down. A bonus tip for those who are still watching is the the red zones that are around the room for room boundaries are not normal red zones. As such, they are only adhering to anchor points, so you can get an object and place it right up against a door, and as long as it is not entering the next room, you are fine. As another example here, I will get the large asteroid rock pillar that we had, and I will shove it through the wall like it is nobody's business, and it will go through. This is very, very useful and interesting for some shared capacity instances that you can take advantage of. Next, I will show some examples of why clipping is kind of essential. So to start, I will go with architecture, since I know more people make structures than they do sculptures. We are going to start with Pontiff's Cathedral, because I often get asked with this room, how did I do the seamless vaulted arches on the ceiling? And for most people who have no idea what clipping is or how it works, they don't understand that that vaulted arch is actually 10 different decorations. If we get up close here, I'll pull it apart and you can see that there are 2 arches that are just squished together to bring together a point, and then there are 4 different entrati walls on either side to kind of create that uniform surface, and they're all clipped in. And if I go outside here to look at it from the outside, you will see that this is a fucking disaster. It looks god-awful, but who cares what the outside looks like, because it is the inside that matters. Not trying to get deep there, Odin, shut up. Firelink Shrine is another great example. This room was more just complete clipping and guessing as opposed to like grid snap or anything like that. Making anything like Riven is going to be completely off the table and 100% impossible without clipping. Getting those teeth together, just as an example, there's just absolutely no way you could possibly do that without having clipping. Another sculpting example would be this first try of the Armored Titan. This hand, just as an example, has something like 20 something pieces in the fist. There's no way on earth you're going to get one of the tendons going to the knuckles in there without clipping it. Like, there's so much crap in there, there's so much going on that you have no way to do it without that. And then lastly, we will do some quick troubleshooting and Q&A. As for the troubleshooting side, a lot of people come to me and tell me, hey, this is not working, to which I will usually say, hey, do you have grid snapping on or any other modifier? And they usually tell me yes. And so please make sure everything else is off. You cannot have any modifiers on when you're going to clip with local constrained movement. The other thing to make sure of is that you're actually on local constrained movement. If you come to me and complain but you were secretly on world and just forgot to hit Z, then I'm going to smack you. The other thing I hear all the time is that this doesn't work on consoles, but it does. I have people who play on consoles that are my friends that decorate all the time, and if suddenly this weren't working on consoles, I would hear about that very quickly, and oh my god, it would be awful. But this is not that time, and it's probably not going to happen ever either, so please don't comment telling me that it doesn't work on console, because it does.